A very warm welcome to you. Welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news that counts. We start with the number of the day. Every day we bring you a number that's important. Tonight we're focusing on the economy of our neighbour, the Kingdom of Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. Well, Eswatini is one of the smallest countries in Africa, but it has big economic dreams. We'll speak to the Finance Minister shortly, but first let's look at where it comes from and where it wants to go. So Neal Rijkenberg recently said that the economy probably grew by 1.4% last year. This is the economy of Eswatini. That is better than South Africa, of course, but he's outlined plans to return Eswatini to its glory days, where growth was in the double digits. Rijkenberg is positive about this year, saying growth is expected to reach 2.9% in 2020. So that'll be, if it gets there, almost double to 2019. Well, Eswatini has been enjoying better demand for its major exports, which are food processed goods, the manufacturing of beverages, textile goods as well. But can that last? Because Eswatini has very close economic ties to South Africa, which it depends on for the vast majority of its imports and about 60% of its exports. Nearly 40% of the population were living below the poverty line of $1.90 in 2017 at the last count. The challenges in Eswatini include a high prevalence of HIV/AIDS, high unemployment and high inequality, which we see, of course, here as well. Well, to discuss, we're now joined on the line by the Finance Minister of Eswatini, Neal Rijkenberg from Eswatini. Thank you very much, Minister, for being with us. So economic growth of 1.4% last year, but you're talking about double-digit growth in future. How will you get there?
Thank you, Francis, and thanks for having me on the line and being able to have a meeting with me. Correct. So our numbers for the year that we have just finished, 2019, it looks like 1.4%, even though it is a conservative figure. Our numbers sitting at 2.9% for the year that we are in. The World Bank has actually come out with a 2.6%. So the World Bank has put Eswatini at 2.6% growth for the year that we are in. Our economy, as you mentioned, is slightly more robust because we are not a resource-based economy. Our economy really is based on manufacturing, sugar, timber, fruit concentrates or juice concentrates, as you mentioned. We're a bit more diverse. So in a sense, one handles economic pressures like the China-America trade war going on. With us not being resource-based, we don't get affected that badly by that. So our economy somehow weathers the storm slightly better. But again, like you say, very closely linked to South African economy, and one is tied at the hip in a certain way.
So that's confusing to me that you did better last year than you did the year before, given South Africa's economy in the doldrums. Aren't we a major risk for you then?
Like I say, we definitely are tied at the hip with our economies. But at the same time, with us not being linked to the resource exports, one has a slightly, in a sense, a more resilient economy. Being based more on products that are exported and products that are produced here. For instance, this year our trade deficit, we had a positive trade balance of about 4.6 billion, which our economy is quite a big number.
Yeah. And future-wise, you're talking about double-digit growth. You're talking about using ICT and education to put a dent in unemployment, tourism. Just tell me where you'd like to be.
Thanks, Francis. You're right. We come up with a strategic roadmap about a year ago as cabinet and as a country, and we're prioritizing 5 areas: agriculture and agro-processing, tourism, ICT and education, manufacturing, and then mining and energy. And in all of these areas, we've got a lot of action going on in this space. But at the same time, really, trying to open Eswatini for business. We really believe Eswatini we haven't been able to leverage off the peace and stability which this country provides, and we really plan to do that now and to make sure we link that up with economic drive. Yeah. And we believe the two coming together Eswatini can do something quite special.
Well, you say you want Eswatini to be a preferred investment destination. So for investors looking at Africa, a very small country between South Africa and Mozambique, what can you offer as the draw card that'll take them away from your neighbors into Eswatini?
We believe that peace and stability is the biggest draw card, and it's something that's probably been underplayed in Africa. But at the same time, we must keep in mind with the trade platforms taking place in Africa, it really comes down to trade agreements. So we are part of COMESA, part of SADC. At the same time, we have strong trade agreements. We've a Go agreement. We've got agreements in the EU. At the same time, a very special supply agreement into the Republic of China and Taiwan. So if one looks at the trade agreements that Eswatini have, we do actually tick quite a special box in the sense that we have access into most areas, and in a sense, not as much as other countries do, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. Like South Africa, you're also struggling with debt. The IMF talking about debt. Is that getting under control? What are your plans there?
So our debt is currently sitting about 28% of our debt to GDP ratio. It has been accelerating over the last 3 to 4 years, which has been concerning. But at the same time, in this year's budget, we've managed to bring our what we call a budget deficit down to 3.6%, which is really aiming at the right direction. At some point, the IMF was saying we're almost double-digit budget deficits. Last year it was about 6, and this year 3.6. We've really accelerated that downwards to be able to bring that fiscal spend and the debt acceleration into control. Yeah. The IMF says one shouldn't get above the 35%, of which obviously a lot of African countries are really battling with. That's really the space that they're having big issues in. And unfortunately, our risk is not there. We're still in very healthy space. We had to stop that acceleration, which we feel we've managed to do, and we feel we've got it under control.
Yeah. You spoke about China, and a concern across the African continent sometimes is that China is making inroads, holding assets, holding debt, sometimes really having huge influence over African countries. Just tell me about your relationship with China.
So, Eswatini, our motto is that we are enemy of none, friends of all. But at the same time, we recognize we recognize Taiwan, and we have diplomatic ties with Taiwan, which means that the mainland China does actually not recognize diplomatic ties with us. So, and we are the last African country to actually hold the diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and because of that, obviously our relationship with mainland China isn't like most other African countries. Taiwan has been a very good friend of Eswatini over more than 50 years. And supports us in many different ways, and more with grant kind of funding rather than other kind of funding. So we value that relationship. We would love, obviously, to have a good relationship with mainland China. We value them. We import a lot from them. Export very little to them, though. But at the same time, there aren't diplomatic ties between the two countries.
And I think China has lashed out before. Is this an economic loss for you, this lack of relationship with China?
So at the moment, there is pressure. There is pressure from mainland China for Eswatini to not recognize the Republic of China and Taiwan. But at the same time, we need to understand we buy a lot of products from mainland China. So obviously, if they don't want us to buy products from them anymore, obviously they can reduce that and stop that. But one would have been in more trouble, if I can put it that way, had we been exporting a lot to them. And we exported very little to mainland China because it's mainly resources that make its way to mainland China. And Eswatini isn't a resource-based exporter. We export very little, almost no natural resources.
All right, we're about to end it, but of course, for the economy, tourism is a big draw card, something that you'd like to support as well. Tell me why South Africans should visit Eswatini, very quickly.
Thank you for that. We've just been rated in the top 5 destinations by one of the top rating agencies in the tourism sector. And for that reason, really believe Eswatini is something very special. We've protected our culture for many years, and many of the cultural events is something very, very special to come and visit. And for that reason, we really believe it's an untapped potential, which we just find is starting to open now. So the tourism sector is really booming at this stage. And yes, I was referring to Lonely Planet earlier. And in that sector, we believe there's a lot of growth potential.
All right, thank you so much. Let's end it there. Finance Minister of Eswatini, Neal Rijkenberg, and of course a small landlocked country, a neighbor to South Africa with big economic dreams.